Welcome back to Pixelpop Festival 2020. I'm Jordan Jones-Brewster, the session manager here at Pixelpop, and I'm extremely excited to introduce our next session. We're Tired, Broke, and Burnt Out, a post-mortem on game design graduate school, which is a series of micro-talks reflecting on games academia, presented by Jack Hart, Francesca Carletto Leone, Tamara Duplantis, Chris Kindred, and Aris Brooker. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is our talk. We are tired, broke, and burnt out. A postmortem on game design graduate school. So how this is going to work is we're going to have a series of micro talks by some really rad speakers and friends of mine, and then we're all going to get together afterwards and do a kind of panel on graduate school in general. You'll probably get the gist of how I feel about graduate school. 20-ish things graduate school faculty don't want you to know. So first of all, I went to grad school. Last year I graduated from Northeastern University with a Master's of Science in Game Science and Design. So first and foremost, if I was to give any tip about graduate school, it's take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, listen to your body, listen to your mental state. At the end of the day, you are more important than your output and your creative output. And that's probably good just life advice, but grad school is like a nightmare, whirlwind time, and you may forget this, and try to remind yourself of that. Also, your school will have resources including funding, physical spaces, equipment, and people, oftentimes just for people who are doing graduate school. So find those available resources where they're available and find out how to take advantage of them. But also be aware that some of those resources may not be worth it because schools are just giant administrative nonsense messes. If your thesis advisor is not excited about your thesis, you might have one if you're doing a master's thesis or a dissertation. If you're doing a PhD, change your advisor if you can. Your thesis is really the most important part of your thesis, I think, is what you get out of it creatively and professionally. So, for instance, I changed mine last minute, and we're going to have a big old story about that at the end. A good advisor will be your ally and lift your work, not ignore you or put you down. GDC is not as important as local game organization. For whatever reason, lots of games faculty talk about how great and important GDC is for your career and how it's the end-all be-all, and they're wrong. Also, 2020, who knows if GDC is going to be around next year. Reach out to local communities outside of your school. If there's an indie scene in your area, go to those meetings, show off your games, and you can learn from those people sometimes even more than you would the people inside of your university. Also, very little people will care about you and your well-being in academia, so you will need to stand up for yourself and work at not being burnt out. What does that look like? Well, that's self-care. Well, what does self-care entail? It includes taking breaks, including extended leaves of absences, which most, if not all, universities have, getting off the internet, getting off campus, doing things with your friends that then the things you do don't have anything to do with games or game development, as well as just surrounding yourself with supportive and loving people. Also, find other people who are excited about the things you're excited about. Support each other. That's going to be your entire way to have a successful cohort and organize your cohort, is to find people who want to create similar or the same things as you, and working to foster that community will not only make your grad school time, I think, more creatively and professionally fulfilling, but also will just be healthier. Grad school is less about teaching you and more about giving you the time, space, and tools to be the best you. And whether or not that's correct or not, or whether that's what graduate school should be, it means you have to take responsibility of your own education, and you cannot wait for broken leadership to guide you. Sometimes they just won't even want to guide you or teach. Take advantage of the time, though. Use the time to make cool shit. Do weird things, alternative things, punk things. Create things that may not succeed in your vision, but are shooting to do some wild stuff. And if all your classes that are being offered to you during a semester or whatever seem really bad or unexciting, there's a thing you can usually do called a directed study, where you can get a few of your people in your cohort and get a professor to sign off on it and kind of just make up your own class. I did it. It was very cool. Try to take other classes and other disciplines if you can, if your program allows for it. I took an architecture class and grew more from that than I did from like all of the other games classes combined. It's like you're likely your school will dump you the minute you leave, so be ready for that. They will start asking you for money though. And so like when I give this kind of spiel, usually the thing that I get people asking is like, do I regret going to grad school? And like that's an impossible question. Because if I hadn't, I'd probably be more financially stable, and I would have, like, if I'd focused on games, not at grad school, I probably would have accomplished more in those 2 years. But also, my original, like, focus and what my degree is in games user research. And there was this important dude from Microsoft at a games user research conference I went to, and this important Microsoft man was talking about how great user research is, and everybody else in the crowd is like, yeah, it's important. And I'm like, oh no. I don't care about any of the things we're talking about here. Actually, I kind of hate it all. Because I just want to make games, and games that make people feel stuff, and it's just like experimental art shit. And so I did like a complete 180 with like 3 months or probably closer to 3 weeks left of school, and like changed what my entire thesis was about. And now I make cool experimental games. And I don't know, like life happens. I don't know how to tell you anything else. So in conclusion, grad school is a stepladder. There are other stepladders. And that is the end of my talk. But I have one more thing, which is I found a slide on here that I don't know why it's there. That's the end of my slides. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Iris Bricker. I am non-binary, use they, them pronouns. Welcome to my micro talk, Unpaid Labor, the Cost of Being the Token Queer. A little bit about me, I have an MS in Game Science and Design from Northeastern University in Boston. I teach game design and psychology in that same program. Currently, I am an associate designer at Ubisoft Red Storm, and I am also the token queer. Let's start with some quick definitions. The token queer is a person who's considered a representative of the LGBTQIA group, sometimes just for looks. Being the token goes far beyond just queer people, though. You can be token black person, token immigrant, token woman. The token is someone from a marginalized or minority background that is pushed into a role that represents everyone else of that background. Emotional labor, a term that comes to mean invisible and often undervalued work involved in keeping other people comfortable and happy. This is a social job you never asked for, but now you have. As a student, the token queer has labor beyond normal homework assignments. They are expected to be the expert in all things queer. This leads to educating others, which often means answering questions that others could have easily researched themselves. Once you speak up, everyone expects you to continue to do so. Teachers, students, and even other marginalized people wait for you to lead the way. That leads to being singled out in diversity discussions. You could be recruited into diversity committees, asked to speak at events, or simply looked to for the answers in the classroom. As a result, you're never truly invisible. Anytime a diversity issue comes up, it somehow got back to you. Personally, I was exploring a lot of my identity in grad school, and every change in my appearance was called out by my classmates. As an educator, the token queer takes on more responsibility. Often this includes revising curriculum so that it has more than a singular perspective. You might even need to openly correct work. I personally had to speak out against a book written by a well-known designer for its sexist content. You also might have to push for diversity in enrollment. You then have to care for those marginalized students to ensure that they are not being mistreated. While teaching, you often face disrespect from students because of your identity, even if they're not doing it on purpose. Personally, this led to me being forced to dress much more formally than my cis male peers to have the same amount of respect. The list goes on. You can't have an off day. You are often considered aggressive and selfish for speaking up. You have endless meetings outside of the classroom and outside of your normal hours. You can be afraid to express your true thoughts for fear of being called aggressive or perhaps there other kind of negative impact down the road. Your rights are always being questioned at your school, in your degree program, but then also just like your country at large, which will just impact your mental health in your current state. There's also so many DMs. Personally, I don't mind this too much, but it is still a lot of work. Anytime I speak up about any kind of issue, I have people in my messages asking me to clarify and go on more, telling me their own stories, and often they're marginalized people saying, yes, I relate to this and I agree. And it's not that that is a bad part, it's just more work, more emotional labor. Happy to do it, but it's still more in your mind. So what can we actually do about this? What is some of the way forward? I'm going to look at it from a student perspective and then from an instructor perspective. For students, you need to be an active ally. This is not just you saying yes, that you agree with these things. You need to stick up for each other and for marginalized people in your classroom. Don't allow advocacy to become someone else's job. And this is for both you marginalized students and from those who do not identify as any form of queer LGBT groups. Ask hard questions of your professors, administration, and others. Ask them why there aren't more diverse candidates in your degree program. Ask them why your professors all look exactly the same. Ask them if you can look at games from a different type of perspective or play games made by different people. Don't let them get away with mediocrity. Be sure to find your people. Don't assume that you are the only person that feels the way that you do. Work really hard to build up that group. This is something you're going to have to do really early on. Sometimes you only find it by being outspoken at first, and then you gather people around you. And related to that, don't ask, or do ask for help. Don't go without any help. Don't try to do it even alone, or you'll be overwhelmed. Find your people, form your group, speak up and stick up for each other so that it's a group of you presenting a front and a movement rather than a single person having to do all of the work. From an instructor perspective, be one step ahead. Prepare for your marginalized students by diversifying your curriculum and your own perspective. Don't wait to be asked to do this. Build into your curriculum games and information and research by queer authors, by queer performers, by queer designers, by other marginalized groups as well. They can come from different backgrounds. I'm not just speaking of just queer here, although this talk's mostly centered around that. This goes for any marginalized community. Don't wait to be asked to make your work represent more than just your own viewpoint. Also promote open conversations about this and allow students to express themselves in their assignments without any penalty. You could have students that are disagreeing with you. Even if you are in favor and you're speaking out and being an advocate, they do need to be allowed to express their perspective. You can then bring it into a conversation if you need to bring around and correct some of their perspective, but they need to feel like they can actually openly talk about this. And that will help that any token queer student that you have or marginalized student that you have feel like you have their back and they aren't going to get points docked off for having this strong opinion. Also anticipate that some of your students will have high loads of emotional labor in addition to their assignments. And be sure that you are not part of that problem. If you are relying on your token queer student in your classroom to educate you, that makes you part of the problem. Create feedback channels for your students to express concerns and needs in a safe way. You can have anonymous and not anonymous, probably a mix of both would be the best way to do it. Ways that can go through administration. In my grad school, we formed a student committee, and that had less to do with specifically queer issues, but it was a way to give feedback about our professors and about the program in general without directly confronting every person involved. They need to be able to tell you how you are doing in a way that is not going to make them feel jeopardized with their grades. Finally, be mindful of the personal lives of students. Many of them will be living away from home for the first time and exploring their identity, which means they'll be more open here at home. It could also be the reverse. Maybe they're more open at home than they are in their classroom. In general, just be mindful of this and be careful if you're contacting with anyone else who knows the student, such as administration, other professors, their classmates, anything like that. A student may express more to you in their classroom if they feel comfortable with you, or maybe in their personal writings and their assignments that other students aren't seeing. They may be really open in their perspective and things that they're talking about. You need to be careful that you don't accidentally out someone, that you don't overshare things that they told to you in confidence. And especially if you are in contact with anyone's families, don't make sure that you are the one that is spilling the beans there. Really, the idea here is you need to just treat them with as much respect as possible and not put the work on the student so that you don't become part of the problem. I could go on for much longer, but we'll stop there. I'm always happy to talk further. You can find information in my speaker bio. Thank you very much for listening to my talk.
Hey, I'm Chris Kindred. I am a recent graduate of New York University Game Center. I had a concentration in game design and narrative design during my time there, and I'm currently a game designer at Filament Games, where I make games for learning and impact. So before I begin, I think it's important to discuss why I went to graduate school in the first place. There are only really 3 points I could boil it down to. The first is that access to online resources aren't compiled in a way that that's conducive to deep learning, at least learning the way I learn. And hopefully others can relate. But there's so much information, information free of context, free of answers to the niche questions that you would ask or the fringe problems. Not having someone there to clarify any issues you might have is a great way to discourage learning. Also, conferences cost so much, and you could spend hundreds of dollars getting to a conference, come back empty-handed, and wonder what exactly it costs to break into games. And also, for graduate school itself, it was class mobility. I was in a dead-end job. I wanted to not worry about surviving month to month. So entering grad school, having even loan money to live off of, help pay my bills down. Grad school gave me a safety net financially, which I could use to have time to work on ideas, work on classes, be a good student, be a functioning student, and a functioning artist at the same time. The downside to all this is that I was the only Black student in my year at graduate school. And if you're watching this and you're entering a similar situation or know someone who might be, then I have the Black Grad Student Survival Guide. Or how to survive graduate school when you're the only Black student in your year. Holy shit, what did you sign up for? So the first thing I have is for you to seek out a mentor. Grad school is hard with support. You should definitely find somebody to help lay out what your tenure there will look like. You should also cultivate a relationship not just on commiseration, but earnest collaboration. You'll have all the time in the world and so many opportunities to commiserate, but make sure you find someone who is excited about your ideas. Also find and whose ideas you're excited for too. Also find a mentor who understands how much their time and resources mean to you as a student. It is not totally uncommon for to feel like you're eating up someone's time, right? Or they're waiting for you to leave. And when you're Black, when you're on the margins at all, just that level of standoffishness that can come from high academics, that opens the door for so many ways to be discouraged. Find someone who doesn't exude that feeling. Next up, seek out a community. Use your school's wellness resources to their fullest extent. I wouldn't have made it through grad school. Hell, I don't know if I would have made it through life if I didn't use NYU's resources to find a therapist and a psychiatrist. It was that valuable to me. Whoops. Okay. I think I skipped the slide, which is seek out a community. It will be hard. Find them where you can. And honestly, find people who you can bounce off of and people who you can feel comfortable existing around. That sounds like such a basic thing to say, but when you're in an environment that you have to make it a habit to appeal to a lot of people's goodwill, I think you should at least find relationships that you find enjoyable. Um, yeah. And lastly, be on your own bullshit. Lean into the things that you like, and also aspects of the craft that you can resonate strongly with. Your experiences, your perspectives are inherently valuable. By working in games, just by virtue of working in games and studying in games, you are bringing something that games doesn't have. And honestly, that combination of things helped me be a much stronger artist in all ways, and also helped make grad school that much more bearable. I don't know if I would have made it through if I wasn't able to find those things. My time is limited here, but yeah, I hope any of this helps. And thank you.
Hi, Pixelpop. This is Francesca, or Cheska. I am an independent game designer and developer. I am currently a game designer at Fulbright, working on their next title. I also work with independent studio Contigo Games. I'm also the curriculum director for Code Coven. We teach online classes for people of marginalized genders who want to get into game development and game making. And also a photo of my dog Olive, because it wouldn't be a Francesca Pixelpop talk unless I showed at least one dog photo. All right, so these are some of the projects that I've worked on in the past. Many of these have actually demoed at previous Pixelpops. So yeah, it's great to be back, and I'm going to jump right into my micro talk, which is how to survive video game grad school. So this is going to be with a focus and emphasis on self-care practices. So here's a throwback. So here's me in undergrad. So this is a photo of me just like working on a paper really late at night. So why was this happening? Why was I like this? The reason was that I was hearing things like this a lot. Your classwork is not enough. You need to be making games outside of your courses, or you should be grateful to be here, right? The games industry is highly competitive. Or this industry is made of passionate people. If you won't put in the extra hours, you don't belong to be here. And this is something that we hear a lot in games academia, but also just in general when we're starting out our careers. But here's the big point of my micro talk is you can't make games if you're dead. You really need to take care of your body and your mind, and do not be proud of crunching or pulling all-nighters. And I've made these mistakes in the past. I've really glorified overworking myself. So I just want to talk about the difference of like, here is me in undergrad walking home from a game jam at 4 a.m. After sleeping on the floor of the computer lab, versus me in graduate school who was really pursuing specific career goals and really prioritizing my time and also taking care of myself. The reality of graduate school is that I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome because I'm in an environment that is moving very fast and everyone within the space is producing such high quality work. I dealt a lot with just self-doubt, and that affected my ability to take breaks because I always wanted to be working and producing and trying to keep up. And this resulted in burnout. So burnout is the lack of motivation or drive to really do anything. So you feel very uninspired. And when you're working in a creative field, this is a super difficult thing to get out of. The other reality is money worries. You're paying so much to be in graduate school. You really feel like you need to make the absolute best use of that time because every class, every hour costs you so much money, right? You need to make it worth it. And then just the constant worry about future career, and also, is this a good idea? What am I doing? I don't know. Oh gosh. So I think that just like the way that academic programs are structured, and particularly something as intense as graduate school, you're juggling so many responsibilities, both in terms of coursework and classes, but also in terms of external jobs, family obligations. And this was something I absolutely dealt with. And I think as you're juggling, it's really important to think about working towards your specific goals. And are all of these things that you're juggling, things that you have to be juggling right now? Are there things that you can like put down and come back to later? So if it's not working towards a direct goal of yours in your career or in your life, or if it doesn't bring you joy, right? Because that's also an important thing, then I would recommend you put that thing down and come back to it later. So really keeping goals in mind was something that made a huge difference for me. So thinking about absolutely everything I do, all of my time and energy, am I working towards this tangible goal that I've set for myself in the future? And once you know what your goals are and you've really identified them, it's a lot easier to figure out the steps that you need to take to achieve them. So goal-oriented prioritization is the strategy that I recommend that I've been using and has really made a difference in my life. So once you have your goal, just making sure that, you know, all of the things that you're juggling are bringing you closer to where you want to get to. Because as I said, you're investing a lot of time, a lot of money, but usually, you know, master's programs are only 2 years. You only have so much time that you can spend without overworking yourself and ultimately damaging yourself and your body. Honestly, I'm still burnt out from grad school, and it's been a year, right? A year plus since I've graduated. And the other thing I would recommend is taking some time to chat with yourself and give yourself permission to be less than perfect. I was really, like when I was younger in high school, but also in undergrad, I was really like a high achiever, and I was, I don't know, encouraged, but also put this on myself where I needed to give 100% in everything that I did. And I think that just like this is what causes burnout. And this is, I think you need to like really identify like, do I need to be investing 100% into this thing? Is it working me towards my goals? If not, you know, can I give 50%? Is that okay? Can I save it until later? Could I pass this responsibility to someone else? And I think this is really hard, especially for folks of marginalized identities, right? Where we feel like we often need to prove ourselves in order to take up space, especially within the games industry, which isn't always accommodating or inclusive. I think Jack touched on this in their talk, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but getting a hobby outside of games is really important. Not only does this help you take breaks and, you know, get away from your work and have a work-life balance, but it also makes your games better, honestly. I believe that we should be pulling inspiration from other mediums and from other activities and bring those experiences and inspirations into our game making. So not only will you feel more inspired and more rested, but I think you'll make better games. So the conclusion is really grad school is really difficult and extremely demanding, and a lot of the time, or I would say like in my experience, there are not a lot of resources and guidance on how to manage all of those responsibilities. So please take time to identify your goals, identify how much energy you're able to put forth without damaging yourself. Please sleep, please rest, and also please check on your peers and make sure you're fostering a community where you know, you're encouraging other people to also be mindful and to take breaks. And yeah, so invest in yourself and the projects and people that are important to you. But if opportunities aren't in line with your goals, it's okay to say no to them and pass them to someone else. All right, that's it. Thank you so much. Have a great Pixelpop. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Tamara Duplantis. I am a PhD in Computational Media at UC Santa Cruz, formerly an electronic music MFA at Mills College, and I am here to give y'all a 5-minute primer on funding your graduate school education. So, usually when people come up to me and ask for advice about entering grad school, there's one thing that I want to really stress to them, which is that universities can pay for your grad studies. It is possible. It is a thing. Unlike, you know, most undergraduate programs where you are paying to go there, you can, in fact, get money from your university. Your university can pay you to be there and to perform your education. In fact, I would say universities should pay for your grad studies, and that if a university won't pay for your grad studies or help you find funding, it may not be worth it. Now, when you're looking for funding, there are many different kinds of funding, and it'll often depend on what kind of university you're looking at, what kind of program you're looking at, what department it's in, what type of degree. So, for example, it's a lot easier to find funding for a PhD than it is for an MFA. A lot easier to find funding for an MFA than for an MS or an MA. I do know people who have found funding from their master's program up through PhD. So it is possible. But the best way to start looking for these possibilities is to talk to your potential advisor. So if you're looking at a school that you're interested in, look at their faculty, find the person who you want to study with, whose work aligns with yours, and talk to them and get a sense if the program is right for you and how they can support you. And if you get them excited in your work, then you might be able to they might be able to vouch for you for different funding opportunities within the university, and vouch for you in other opportunities outside as well, and can point you in some directions. You should also talk to current students in the program because they have been through what you are currently going through. They can point you to faculty whose work aligns with yours, and they can point you to their funding sources. Again, availability of these funding resources will vary wildly between institutions, departments, degree types, but please do your research. I can't list them all in 5 minutes, but I'm going to try. So types of funding. Again, this will depend on your field. Most commonly, you will find teaching assistantships, who's helping the instructor do the class. You might also find graduate student instructor positions in which you are just teaching the class. Research assistantships, where you are helping a professor undergo some kind of research or some kind of project. This will probably require some grant money. Lab assistantships, in which you are helping run some facility at the university, and assisting people who are coming in with questions. You can find different grants, writing up your own projects and sending them out to funds that can give you money to further that research or that project. You can also find scholarships and fellowships that will invest in you as a person. There's a bit of an emotional toll to these because, as you can see here, oftentimes you do need to kind of talk about your personal history to really convince them that you are worth investing in. Me personally, right now, I am on a fellowship that I managed to acquire because of my writing about my trauma that I've experienced as a trans woman and just as a woman in the world. So yeah, you may need to bare your soul a little bit, and there's going to be an emotional toll there. But it is a way to get money. It is a way to get funding. Now, once you are at your university, if you're at your university and you have a employer-employee relationship with them through teaching or through research assistantships, but they are not paying you fairly, graduate student worker unions exist. We have one at UC Santa Cruz. We're affiliated with the United Auto Workers Union. If one does not exist at your university, you can make one, and if conditions get real bad and you cannot afford to live in the place where you are working, and enough people can't afford that, you can strike. Now, it might get risky, but having that organization there can help mitigate those risks. In the case of UC Santa Cruz, we did have a labor strike. We did not get all of the demands that we were asking for as graduate students, but we got a little bit more money. So this is a possibility. If things are bad, you can strike. Also, if things are really, really bad and it does not work for you, it is absolutely okay to leave. Just walk out. You can leave. If it sucks, hit the bricks. You don't need to stay in graduate school if you are having a bad time in grad school and you are losing lots of money in grad school for something that you are not enjoying. It's absolutely fine, and there should be no shame in that. Graduate school is one thing that you can do, and there are many, many, many possibilities. Now, if there's one thing that I want to leave y'all with, it is this fact. You are valuable. Your work has value. Your time and work in graduate school is valuable and worthy of compensation, and I strongly suggest that in your time in graduate school, you advocate for yourself and you fight for yourself. Yes. Thank you. I hope y'all have a great conference, and I will see y'all later at the discussion. Please enjoy the other talks in this wonderful session. Have a good Pixelpop. See y'all.
Hey, hi. Welcome, Pixelpop, welcome. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, this is Retired, Burned Out, and Broke. Yes.
We sure are.
So broke.
Yeah. We're tired, burned out, and broke our time in graduate school. So today we're just gonna kind of have like a talk about our talks. We're gonna have a talk about our talks in grad school, and that's gonna be a cool time. This is like the question in my slides, and the question that I think is the question I get asked all the time of like, do you recommend going to grad school?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start because I've been asked that like 3 times this month even. And I think it's especially an interesting question for the games industry because like I don't think the current state of the games industry, you need a degree in games to work in games. Yeah, so I'm really interested in like why each of you did decide that grad school was something that you wanted to do and invest in.
Yeah, sure. I'll kick this off. As I explained in my video, it's about class mobility. At the time that I applied for grad school and got in and sought funding, scholarships and such, it was all in service of literally buying myself more time to be able to work on my projects and to be creative. Otherwise, it would have just been a month-to-month slog, and maybe 10 years later, I'd be making the same progress I made in those 2 years.
Yeah, I think my reason was very similar, where I was looking at that point in my life to make a really severe like career pivot and really trying to like get different skills and work in a different, and like basically like redo my entire resume, right, with like different experience and different projects. And I think I absolutely could have done that outside of graduate school, but this offered me like structure. It offered me space to be experimental with my games and with my process. And it also gave me like, yeah, access to professors who had that expertise and could guide me. And also you're also paying for like often the visibility, right, of being associated with that university and with that name, which I think, you know, is also something that I was seeking out, was a way to be more visible with my work. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think touching on that, like it sucks that it's a thing that happens inside of the space, but like saying that you're in grad school or you graduated with like a master's, or like, especially from like more well-known colleges, like throws weight around, especially when like you have like when your advisor is a successful developer being like, I worked with blankety blank.
Yeah.
And like, which also in some ways in real material regards, I think sometimes can literally mean nothing depending on like your relationship with those people and your relationship with the school itself. I think like obviously like we all have different experiences in our queerness and our queerness in games, but like, does anybody want to, I can start off if nobody else wants to, but kind of like how that affected your experience at grad school. Aris and I are in the same cohort, and I saw them laughing, and that is very good.
That's my whole talk, just like rehashing what you and I went through.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think the thing that maybe surprised me, like my undergrad, I was at like one of the largest, if not the largest university in United States. So like being
like there was no face or visibility of like anything you did there. Going to grad school, which is like incredibly more intimate, and then like everybody being in your business all the time. I think the thing I was very much surprised was how much of everything that happened with our time at grad school, and I'm sure many other people, is like it's 99.9% microaggressions. Like it's all the things that aren't said, it's all of the looks, it's all the people being like, is it okay, you're here, can I say? Or
yeah, so I have a very complicated, I guess, relationship to grad school in regards with my queerness, because so I've been to grad school twice. I got my MFA in music at Mills College, and I am in the computational media PhD at UC Santa Cruz. And my choice to go to Mills College for my MFA largely was to find a space where I could like explore my queerness, because Mills College is kind of known as this like progressive like women and queer college, and so that was a space that I wanted to go to specifically for that purpose, and it worked in that regard. I still don't know if I would have made that decision looking at the debt that the debt that I accrued being there. But I kind of have a different relationship with that being at UC Santa Cruz, and partially in part because at UC Santa Cruz here, I'm on a fellowship that was given to me from like going on about like the trauma that I have kind of had as a trans woman and as like a survivor of like domestic violence. Like I wrote about that in my like in my application, and that's in large part what made them decide to give me this fellowship. So it's a complicated situation. It's very complicated feeling for me.
To kind of add to what you're talking about, yes, like very much selling your marginalization is a survival tactic in graduate school and in life, pretty much. But yeah, no, I've done similar things.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, so Chris and I went to the same graduate school, but I know that our experiences in terms of like, you know, I guess like inclusion of our various identities is very different. So for me, my time in graduate school was the first time that I was in a cohort of majority women, or even in like a games space that was majority women. So for me, that was something that really embraced a big part of my identity. And also being in New York City, where I was surrounded by other queer people as well, right? For the first time, really. So I found that like, for me, a lot of the primary parts of my identity were really embraced by the specific cohort that I was in at the time. But I know that also like, yeah, in terms of racial diversity, our program is not great, extremely not great. And I know that you talked about this in your micro talk as well, Chris.
Went to the degree program because I worked at Northeastern at the time, and I was allowed, when you work there, you could take classes, and so I just kind of fell into it, but completely by accident. So I wasn't like really even seeking it out, but then I got really into it. But at the same time, I was also exploring a lot of my own identity. So that was a weird thing because like during the day, I had my day job at the university where my immediate team was really accepting, almost too far though. They pushed me too fast because some of them wanted me to be there, well, token queer, which is my talk, but they were pushing me there. But then with the classmates, we had so many international students that it was kind of, I think, their first time for a lot of them being around people who were just really open about what was going on. And it's not even like I was trying to be terribly open about what was going on. It just like, well, you really stuck out a lot.
Yeah. And like, also like, it's very weird. I think this is like where it gets difficult for me, like in general about feelings of grad school, is where it's like, oh, like there were all these problems in terms of like queer representation at school and just diversity representation in general. Also, like Aris, like you and I were both dealing with a lot of similar gender feels during the same time, and like we wouldn't have met if we didn't go to grad school. So like, how do I like tell people like don't go to grad school? But like, yeah, I guess like all of my good friends I've met along the way, and like all of the mobility I have inside of the game space for whatever levels those are largely because of the people I knew in grad school.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you said the same thing to me when we met on Train Jam, right? Where it's like, we were both currently in grad school and going to GDC, you know, for self-promotion because we were in grad school, and that's why we met. So yeah.
That's, I cut it out of my talk. But like this talk also comes out of us being at Pixelpop last year, and in between talks being like, yo, like we both just graduated and like, this is really messy. What are we doing? And the woman in front of us turned around, because I was like, we should just get up there right now and do this talk. And the woman in front of us turned around and was like, yeah, that would be cool. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay.
Wow. And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Yeah, absolutely. Chris, did you want to chime in?
I forgot.
Great. Forgetting. This is a great segue here. Forgetting is a thing that happens when you're burnt out. I mean, I'm still burnt out, so much so I like don't work full time in the industry straight up. I like, what do you actually tell people not to be burnt out? Because this is again, like in my talk, I'm like, you shouldn't be burned out. Also, I'm burned out. So like, I don't know, like try not to do what me and everyone on this talk and like everybody in the industry is doing.
I think some of the best scenarios where, well, okay, one, money. Money helps you not burn out. I was about to reference like classmates or other people in other grad programs living comfortably and having healthy work-life balances. Initially, I wondered why I couldn't have that myself. I mean, I'm a mess, but I also realized that these people have financial security on a level that allows them that. So I can't really, I'm right there with you. Can't really advise someone not to be burned out when a lot of what causes burnout comes from like scavenging for survival.
Yeah, I think I when I moved to New York City to do grad school, my partner came with me, and my partner was employed, and that helped alleviate a lot of just like the financial uncertainty, right, that I had going into the program. Because while I was an undergrad, part of why I was so immensely burned out all the time is because I was working part-time jobs, right, constantly. And I think like if living in a city, right, and you're in a really expensive school and you have to pay rent and you have to buy food, right, like it's a huge thing to consider, that like there are costs even outside of like the price tag that's directly on the program, right?
And not to mention, specifically in New York, it's a physically demanding city, right? So, I mean, just on top of that, it is it's a viscerally, like, total body burnout.
Yeah, I found that I would just start feeling like, because I didn't have access to like green space very like easily, I didn't have the ability to really like be outside or be in a quiet environment, right? It's just I think that absolutely contributes to it as well.
Mine was just mostly being so busy because I didn't actually have to pay for my degree because I worked at the school full time, but that meant I was working full time and then I was also in school full time. And because of Boston, I lived an hour outside of the city. So I did all of my homework on my lunch breaks, and I did basically my whole grad degree on a train going to and from my day job, back and forth. So the burnout for me was just, I had to be on every single minute. I would get home after work and I would have to study until late. Or I would go right from work, I would pack up my desk and go immediately into a classroom, and you're like, no break in between. And it was that for 2 years. And that was just, it ended up being so much, in addition to any kind of personal life that I had going on, was so much. And then like Jack and I took on extra roles with like the student committee that we had. while I was also dealing with, okay, it's fall enrollment, so my day job is just slammed, and I have students that are undergrads crying in my office because they're not getting the classes and stuff they want. So much like coming at me from every angle. There wasn't an opportunity for me to be off even for a minute, because if I slipped, I'm not going to get my work done either at work or with my degree. Burnout for me
Yeah.
is time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like, I don't know, that's obviously a lot. And I think like for me personally, I also dealt with a ton of like imposter syndrome, right? And I think that's something when you're in an environment where you're working with, you know, extremely talented and like established professors, but also, you know, your cohort is moving very quickly and producing a lot of really high quality work. I really felt like like you said, like I can't turn off, because every moment I could be working and I could be making this better and I could be learning more, and I only have 2 years. So it's like, yeah, it's just, I don't know, which causes me to just like, you know, overwork and not even realize.
There was a really significant gap between any kind of games background knowledge that I had, and I felt like a lot of other people in my cohort had. They would talk about these games that I'd never played and frequently had never even heard of, so that I felt like I was trying to catch up for quite a long time. You know, well, I can only rest on the merits of my academic writing ability so long if I don't actually know what I'm talking about.
Chris.
To add to both of those points, one, it like going to grad school for games specifically made me think about my childhood very often and what I didn't have growing up. I did not play the games when they hit, and you know, like I didn't have access. You know, like I barely had cable TV. So
Same.
yeah, and on Cheska's point, I think there's something I want to bring up. Actually, I want to pitch to the rest of the panel. Working on projects, did you feel that you needed to be away from a team to kind of like see a vision through, or did you find that the specific scenario I'm getting at is that I took on a solo thesis, not typically recommended in our program and not recommended in life in general.
I did the same, and same.
And I did so because I was like, well, if I joined another team, my story, my perspective is going to get buried, right? Like I'm like, you're not going to see my hand, you're not going to see my vision, you're not going to see me, who I am. I want to show that. And I feel like in order to make a successful project, I'll have to bury myself. Did any of y'all feel like you had to do that?
Yes. I did have a very, I guess, unique games education before coming into this Santa Cruz program, because before this, I was mainly like a music major, but I was taking games courses because I knew that was something that I wanted to like work in, and I wanted to be making games. But before I started my MFA, whenever I go into games related courses, they would say, "Oh, good, we have a musician here. You're going to be making music for everybody else who's making the games, and you won't be learning programming. You won't be doing your own thing." So when I was in my MFA, like I felt very strongly about making my own games, being like just doing it myself, because I was worried that if I was working with a team, I would get shunted off to being the music person again.
It reminds me of the first time I ever did a game jam by myself, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like I get to hang out with everyone and have a good time, and then also like don't have to like have these arguments. I think this is like a big like there's a larger discussion here about class projects versus like actual work, where like the arguments you have in a class project are just different than like what you have when like people have actual like defined creative roles or creative interests and you're collaborating together. And there's either like in like a larger like business sense, there's a hierarchy, or there's a shared understanding of what everyone's getting out of it. And oftentimes I felt like you would get like slammed together with people in different projects. And there were multiple times where like, it would just be like, nobody wants the same thing out of this. And I don't know, like, especially as someone who primarily focuses on experimental games, the thing about grad school for me is the added like academic critical thinking like layer on top of it. It's not just like you're not going to just take a Unity course, or at least at most places that I know of, but that you're actually like being forced to like read literature on games and think like much deeper, and given that space and time to think much deeper on those types of things. And Cheska, as like someone who is like in alternative education in games, like if people want to do those things outside of academia, literally academia, like where do they go? Like what do they do?
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of online programs and like online learning institutions. I think it's the issue, I think, of why I didn't go that route is because it's really impossible to know like the credibility of those institutions and like the I don't know, like if their teaching style and if the way that they run their courses is right for you. I think when you go to a university and an established graduate program, there's a lot more history there, and you can kind of look to that to see if it's what you want and is what is right for you. And to jump back to the previous point as well, I wanted to say that like, yeah, I think there was a huge thing in my cohort of being able to fall back on the established skills that you already have and really showcase those to your professors and like to your cohort, but also that desire to like learn new things and like mess up and fail. But there's a big tension there, right? Because you want to make really good work and you want to use the skills you already have. Yeah, and I think that was really challenging for me as well, of like putting myself in a place where I was like, I'm gonna work on a solo thesis and like I'm gonna struggle so hard and I'm gonna learn so much, but like ultimately the end result is not gonna be something that I'm like publishing, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. One of the most beneficial projects that I did in grad school was the independent study. Jack and I did it together, but we were each making our own individual games. We just kind of followed the same structure. And that was the most beneficial thing because I did everything by myself and we did a bunch of games in a very short amount of time. So I got to do all of the roles really hands-on. But I would not have been able to do that had I not spent 3 previous semesters on teams with people. I needed to learn a lot more from them. So like a mix of both was really good. Ultimately, yeah, I did a solo thesis and then the senior project was all individual stuff, but it took some foundational work through teams to get me there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the games industry is so collaborative that I find that even though I'm a super duper introvert, but like I really need the structure and the motivation of like bouncing off of teammates to do good work. So again, I think like having access to people to work with, but also being able to choose to work solo was fantastic. I think my most successful projects were like pairs or trios, like really small groups where, as Chris was saying, like you don't lose your voice and your input, but at the same time you have that support and that structure of other people.
I think that's a great place to leave off as we are coming to our end. Thank you so much for joining. I would love to talk about this for like the next 4 hours, but like, people gotta go to bed and like there are other things to do.
So much.
This is just the beginning.
There's next Pixelpop. We're burnt out 2.
Still burnt out.
Still burnt out.
Yeah. I'm still
out.
in grad school, so like, check on me in a year.
2 burnt, 2 out.
All right, great. All right, well, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their Pixelpop.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much to Jack, Francesca, Chris, Tamara, and Aris for such a wonderful talk. Remember, you can continue the conversation on Pixelpop Festival's Discord server at discord.gg/pxp and participate in the live Q&As happening in our breakout rooms. Now stay tuned for our next batch of featured games, where we'll have a live Q&A with the development team behind A Lozenge, as well as videos from Hot Pot for One and Heart of Enya.